live auction, so we can look at actual properties that are coming up and go through and look at some of the details about the properties, see what we can tell about the property. Whether it's been offered before, what we think the chances of it going to foreclosure are. And other things like that, so we can help you guys, understand and see how we look at different tax sale lists.
Yeah, now today we're going to be talking about Arizona, but before we do that, let's get into the rules a little bit, and then we'll go look at some of the live properties for sale. So this is just coming directly off of the county website or the county auction website. There's a couple of things that we want to point out. First of all, the tax certificate is going to consist of the sum of the delinquent taxes, which could include previous year taxes and interest, penalty fees, and essentially a taxpayer information fund as well. So all of those fees are going to be built into the opening bid of price. Now, the tax lien certificates, and we've talked about this before, they have a high priority, which means that they really are kind of the first position liens, which means that they need to get paid off before any other debts they're paid. And that's the reason tax liens are so such a safe investment, is really because there's two options: either the property owner pays you back your money and your interest, or there's the foreclosure that can happen.
Yeah. Now they, in Arizona by law, in state law, it basically tells them that that their tax sale certificate auction has to take place in February. And so that's, they're kind of locked into that month. But it's worth it to sometimes to read through some of the state laws, especially if it's an area you're investing in. It can really help you understand why they do some of the things they do and part of how it works. But I like how they explain some of the things here, because sometimes people get confused with liens. And they say right here up front, the tax certificate itself conveys no property rights. It's simply a lien carrying an interest rate. However, if the certificate is not redeemed within 3 years of the date of the original sale, the certificate holder does have the right to foreclose on the property and take possession after taking all the proper steps in the judicial foreclosure process. And so, basically, we can also see down there is it tells us how interest is paid out. In terms of the interest on certificates range from 0 to 16%. And basically it goes to the bidder willing to take the lower percentage. So that kind of tells us how they're going to conduct the auction, but also does a good job of explaining the process. We know there's a 3-year redemption period, on this, and that after 3 years, though, we do have the right to foreclose on, on the property if it hasn't been paid off, or at least we can initiate the foreclosure process, and then the owner can either pay it off or lose the property.
Yeah, now one thing to remember is when we're buying tax lien certificates, simple interest occurs on a monthly basis. For example, if the certificate carries, as it says here, a 12% interest rate, then the interest would recur at 1% per month until the certificate is redeemed. So if you go ahead and buy a tax lien certificate, and let's say it bids down to 12%, and the property owner redeems 2 months later, you're not going to get 12%. You're going to get 1% per month. Now, in some states like Florida, there's a prepayment penalty where if they foreclose, or if they redeem early, then you get a guaranteed 5%. But if they were to go ahead and pay you after 6 months, then you would make a 6% return, because essentially you're making that interest each month as it goes along.
Now, there are some additional rules and things about tax liens that are interesting or good to know. Essentially, though, when the property owner pays off their delinquent bill, that's when you're going to get paid off. That's basically when redemption occurs, the following day. So after the county gets paid, they're going to send a check. A redemption check is sent to the certificate holder, which is going to include your initial investment plus the interest that you've earned, up to that point. They also let us know here that taxes are at least 2 years delinquent when they become available for tax lien certificate purchase. And parcels can be foreclosed on through a quiet title court action 3 years after the date of the sale. That also goes back to our redemption period, but it basically tells us that we can foreclose on the properties and pursue a quiet title action 3 years after the auction.
Yeah, one last point before we jump over that's important to remember is if your certificate remains active for 10 years without redemption or foreclosure action, then the lien will expire, which means that as we're looking in tax lien certificates, and there can be tax liens, we probably won't, I don't know if we'll see any as we're going through today, where those tax liens may have many additional years worth of tax liens on it. It's what we call a toxic tax lien or an underwater tax lien, where we may be looking at a tax lien certificate from 2024 from this year, but there could be up to 10 other years worth of tax liens on that property, and those tax liens could be earning 16% interest per year. So you could have tax liens that are 10 years old earning 16% interest, and one that's 9 years old and one that's 8 years old, and all of those earning interest rates, where maybe you're looking at a tax lien and maybe it's only a couple $100 on some, let's say $10,000, $20,000 lot. Well, you actually get into the full taxes to foreclose on that property. All of those tax liens would need to be paid. So you'd be forced to pay off, each one of those, which could be as much as the property value. So when we see tax liens that have $8,000 worth of delinquent taxes on a property that's only worth $8,000, that's because of all of those years worth of delinquent taxes and the interest that has been earned over that time frame.
Yeah, in fact, let's go and take a look at some liens here, and we can see probably exactly what Steve is talking about here. So this is for Maricopa County. We can see here that they have a total of, uh, 18,715, records here. Although we can see some of them are unavailable and some of them, are still available. What's really interesting about this whole list, at least as I was going through it, was it was hard to find, it was hard to find junk, or even it was hard to even kind of find land. Show you what I mean. So if I'm looking at any of these any of the liens that were for like 1,000 or $1,600 per se, those are all against homes. In fact, it was pretty well for homes on everything that I could find, and not just any homes. I mean, this one has a value of 309,000. Is what they're estimating it at there. This is only a $1,600 lien, and so we're talking about that being, I mean, not even 1%. It's like a 0.5% of the property's value. A very low percentage of value, really. And that's an amazingly low amount considering the fact that that lien has the potential to foreclosure rights if after 3 years it's not paid off. That's what's kind of impressive about it, is just the liens represent very small percentages here. And so we can also see more information. Let's see what the property is. A couple things we can do. We can pull up the property itself in the map and see an overhead image here of it first.
Yeah.
So looking at this one here, we can see that this is it's a single family home, but there's also an additional lot kind of right there in the back where it looks like they got some stuff parked.
Yeah, I almost wonder if it almost looks a little bit commercial. I mean, it's not in a commercial area, but the way they've got all those cars parked out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's R2, but I wonder if they're operating some kind of business or something out of it. But we can go and take a look at that property if we want here. In any case, for only a $1,600 lien, it's a very small lien amount for a property that has pretty, we know, at least $300,000 in value.
Well, and that's the reason why 95% of tax liens will go ahead and pay off before ever, going to the foreclosure process, is that, this family or these owners aren't going to lose their home for $1,000 or $1,600. But it does give them the ability to not have any action taken on their house, and gives them, at least 3 years to be able to come up with the funds to pay that off. And that also doesn't include, oh, I wonder if they changed it a little bit. I don't see any of the cars now.
I think the cars are just gone. I think that's the lot, though. You can kind of see the weird curvature that it had there, and see that people drove in and out. They, maybe at the time, or maybe it was last owner, that's what we're seeing there, images from a previous owner, because they have moved it. But yeah, I think it actually includes this lot, and then the house all the way over. But why don't we take a look at some other details here on it? Well, let's look at the tax bill, because roll up, there we go. That's one of the things that we are always going to be looking at or thinking about, because if you do get the chance to foreclose, let's say in 3 years, one of the requirements that the county is going to have is that you bring the taxes current, and that's going to include paying off, the delinquent tax bill. And so let's do view additional years here. And so here we can see that they paid for 2021, but they've been unpaid for 2022 and 2023. So that means that there was a lien issued last year, I think, right?
Oh, it was lien 2 years ago, which means that the lien that'll be sold in 2024, essentially will be the third tax lien on the property, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
So
that could be paid from 123, but I know that it has to take 2 years before they even issue a lien, on the property. At least that's what the state law says. So, with this, there's at least 2 certificates, if not 3 certificates, that are been issued against the property, that have been unpaid.
yeah, in fact, yeah, we can see the total bill right there. The amount is $2,800. That would be considered, the total amount right now of the lien and roll up. But yeah, I think that is right there. There are other liens that have been issued, against this property. And what that probably means is that this property has an even higher chance of resulting in redemption for the investor. And that's because you already have another lien holder that's ahead of you that has the chance to foreclose on the property if they're, which they bought their lien at last year's sale. And so if that's the case, they're going to have that first year, they're going to have a year head start to foreclose on it. And if they do, what you'll experience is just a redemption. The property will redeem because you'll suddenly get a check, and plus the interest that you earned, but probably a lower chance though of it resulting in a foreclosure or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There's 2 years. So this is a second year lien, not a third year lien. So there's, the lien that was issued last year that was from the 2022 property taxes, and this year. And like Shade said, the chances are, if it does go to foreclosure, that first lien holder would go ahead and pay it off first. If they didn't, then you would have the opportunity to foreclose. But usually, if the lien holder, is savvy, and most people that are buying liens are going to know about when the redemption period and start at that point, so that they could either get their money back or acquire the property.
Here's something that blows me away, and that is the percentages on these liens are crazy. I mean, in terms of like being able to buy liens at such a low percentage of value. I mean, I couldn't find cheap enough. I mean, I guess I could look at $47 liens. I was looking at all the liens under $1,000. One we just clicked on there is $461. So not a big lien. But as we look at the property that it's placed against, it's a single family home, that they value at $263,000. We've got the address on it right here.
One thing about that is it may be a partial lien. That's where we could look in the tax information to be sure. But they may have had a $1,200 bill, and maybe they pay it in the fall and the spring or something like that, and they paid one of those bills but didn't pay both of those bills. So sometimes when we see a really nice property that only has a small lien on it, it's usually because they paid part of the property taxes, just not all of the property taxes. So if there's even $10 remaining, then they'll put a $10 lien against that property. Even if they have a $1,000 bill and they pay 990, they'll still create a $10, a lien on that $10 remaining debt.
Yeah, that's true. They will treat that just the same. And we can see overhead image. It's a single family home, and very easy to tell that, yeah, it probably is worth, easily a couple 100,000 or 300,000 potentially. What we might be able to do, and also we can take a look here and see what the billing tells us here on the property. So kind of a similar situation here on this one where there's a couple of years that are unpaid here, 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, so another second year lien. You know, one thing we'll look at as well as we're looking at property is see if the address is an owner occupied property or is it a business, or some other second type property. We can look and see where the owner's located. Are they local to the area?
They're out of state. This is a Salt Lake City address.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought. It looked like an investment property to me.
Yeah, it probably is. And grab the address and let's take a look at it. And that does look like an ideal investment property.
In fact, Phoenix has finally started to cool down. It was the real estate market was going so crazy there that really it was an area that we had to quit investing in or even looking at just because of the 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 increase in value. But now they're starting to come down, and you're going to be able to start getting better deals in that area again.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this one's an incredibly nice property. And what's amazing about this is that, with the low amount of, that they're asking me, the lien, it probably represents, like 1% of less than 1% of the property's value, which is crazy for liens. Liens that represent a couple percent of the property's value are still good liens to buy. When they're this small of a percentage of value, it's just a drop in the bucket compared to the value.
What's interesting about this property too is we see that it's for sale. We can see information down there below about, grant programs. And so what these owners are probably doing is they're waiting until this property sells to pay off the property taxes. So when the property sells, then they'll go ahead and pay off those 2 years worth of tax lien. So, from their standpoint, they don't mind paying the interest and just waiting until the property sells to eventually pay the property taxes because they know they're not at any risk of losing their property. They still have at least a year redemption on that, or 2 year redemption on that lien from last year before they can start the foreclosure process. So from their standpoint, or at least similar type standpoints, somebody may go ahead and choose to decide to wait to pay those property taxes. In this case, waiting until the property sells, and then once it sells, essentially the sale will go ahead and pay off the liens.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, and one thing that is nice about the records that we're looking at here is that we can learn quite a bit about, about each one of the properties. You can learn what the exact history is here with the taxes and know exactly how much is owed, and all of this stuff you can find pretty fast too. You know, um, Also, if you wanted to drop larger sums, there are lots of, any of the larger liens on here, like a $5,000 lien. I was looking at that. The $5,000 liens are against like commercial properties and more valuable stuff. In fact, let's look at a few of these that are.
In addition to the more expensive liens, I was looking at some of the cheaper liens earlier today. Ones between $200 to $500, and there was lots of liens in that smaller price range that were secured against good valuable property. That's what makes tax lien investing exciting, is that we can find liens against, we could go look at the most expensive tax lien available and look at some of the cheaper liens. Now in those cheaper liens are also going to be the junk, so we're going to need to evaluate the property and make sure it's usable and has value. But there is that ability to purchase liens in multiple different price points depending on what your capital is.
Yeah. Now, let's see here. Can they sell a property that has a lien? No, you shouldn't. That lien is going to prevent the ownership transfer. So, they could go through the process and start trying to sell it, and maybe they could take the proceeds and get it paid off so that they're able to do the transfer. If they do something like that, then in the process of trying to sell the property, then maybe they could make it happen.
Yeah, they won't be able to complete the transaction, but the escrow company, as they're doing that sale, like in the example that we were looking at with that rental property or the commercial, the home that they were selling, you know, they as they go ahead and do and sell the property, then as they're doing the escrow, it'll go ahead and pay off the lien so that they can actually transfer the deed into the new buyer's name. And so it'll all kind of happen, within the same time or shortly before. The escrow company will pay off the liens and then split the check, and it'll all be worked out that way. But Shay's exactly right. They wouldn't be able to sell the property unless those liens were taken off. But that's part of what the escrow company will do in the closing of the transaction is pay off any of those debts with the proceeds that come in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the other comment is you rely on the website that those are all the liens. Yeah. I mean, this is uh, the the basically the tax history here on the county website. Reporting. I mean, this is where they report essentially. Where other liens, or at least what the the tax are. That's what we're looking at really is the past due taxes and that amount.
What's interesting is almost every one of these properties that we've looked at, except for maybe that first one, is an out-of-state owner or a business. Like if you look at the owner up there above, the current mailing address is Angel Heart Behavioral Holdings, and you can see that the property address is different.
Yeah. Yeah. This one's another one that is probably an investment property. And a nice one at that. This one's a nice home. It probably has pretty good value there to it. And I think it was only what was it, like a $3,500 lien, $3,600 lien. Not that big of a lien, really. And yeah, there you've got a property. I mean, that's basically like the lien is less than 1% of the property's value. So yeah, it's hard to find the numbers that good. All right, let's take a look here. Yeah, even like with cheap lien, the inexpensive liens. Here's one for $153. Let's look at this one. And let's see. Even this one is going to end up being a home again. Look at that. It's like a $400,000 house.
Yeah, and this is most likely one of those partial liens that we talked about.
Let's see if we can figure out. Oh, no, now there's a partial lien right there. You see that? That is the $131 is what was left unpaid from the 2022, which is definitely a partial amount there. And then you've got 1 year of unpaid, beyond that. But yeah, that is a partial.
If you look underneath the pending payments up there above, there's an e-check of 131 that came in January 24th, so today.
Oh yeah, yeah. So this one is going to redeem.
Because it has 1,700 due, and we just saw that lien was 131 or something, wasn't it? Or 160?
Yeah, it was $145. What was it? Is it 153 we clicked on?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very small lien. At least for for a house like that. But it's about to redeem. But it is a partial though. It's interesting how we can see that it was just kind of the leftovers there from one of them. But that's what was interesting about this is it was hard to find junky liens. Eventually, I was able to find one that was against a strip, but I had to look for a while.
Yeah, they're going to be on there probably more likely in the 500 to $10 price point. Will most of the junk land will be
Oh,
located.
here it is. That's the strip I found earlier. So this one was, if I finally found one of them here that was inexpensive, $148 here. This one is against a piece of junk land, which if we go like that, we can see.
Yeah, nothing you can do with that property.
Yeah, yeah, and so It's interesting. Yeah, there's the one junk property there that I found so far, but other than that, I mean, we could probably find it too with some of the really inexpensive ones. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these really inexpensive ones are also partials. Some of them might just be against junk property, though.
Yeah, there's still always going to be a number of junk property in any county.
This one's a partial, so this $30 one is against a $350,000 house. If we look at let's pull up the tax bill again and see. It'll probably show us. Oh yeah, there you can see. There's so that's the full amount. What that is it's a half payment. That's what they didn't make, was a half payment. Yeah.
Even at that, it seems like a small property tax on it.
Yeah, well, and it is. I think this one's just a piece of land.
Oh.
Oh, no, actually, no, this one is the house. Hold on, let's pull it up. It does seem like a very small property tax amount. And it is a house. That's a tiny property tax amount for the house. Here, yeah, boy, it'd be nice to be them. They only pay like $106 a year.
Yeah, I don't know if nonprofit. I don't know what's going on with that. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but unless it's a partial payment and they're just showing what they have left. But interesting.
Yeah, I think somehow they get way lower taxes than anybody else.
But hopefully that gives you guys kind of an idea of how to go through and review tax lien certificates, look at some of the upcoming auctions. There really is a lot of opportunity. We were looking at Maricopa County. That'll probably have the most competition. There's a number of other counties, both using real auction, using I believe Grant Street, and then using Zeus Auction, where they'll be auctioning off these tax lien certificates. And in some of those other counties, there'll even be less competition. And one thing we didn't, look at a whole lot in Phoenix, there's a lot more homes in that area, is that, as we're looking at tax lien certificates, chances are you're just going to make back your interest. You're not going to acquire the property. And so if we're looking at two tax liens and one's on a $200,000 house, and one's on a $200,000 plot of land, chances are that home is going to be more aggressive in the bidding, which maybe we're only going to be able to get 6% interest rate on the home, where we could get 13 or 14% on the land. And so as you're looking at your tax lien certificates or reviewing or registering, keep that in mind, that some of those tax liens that maybe aren't quite as sexy can sometimes be just as good, because chances are we're just going to be getting the interest rate either way.